Welcome to my gross overreaction for cards that have not seen play yet, but will be legal for North American International Championships and the World Championships. Hey guys, my name is Rahul. Today we're going to be doing a tier list for Paldea Evolved cards. If you didn't know, Paldea Evolved is our set releasing on June 9th, meaning it will be the first set legal for the North American International Championships, which is arguably the biggest tournament of the year, I guess, besides the World Championships. So, shout out to my boy Zapdos TCG. I saw him do a tier list video this morning, and I figured, hey, it feels like we're about that time. We're close to pre-releases. I don't know, like 2-3 weeks out from pre-releases. The set is going to be dropping in about 3 weeks, actually. So it seems like a great time to honestly sit down and pretend like we know what's going on. I don't know what's going on, but we're going to pretend like we do. So if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. We can come back to this after NAIC and see how right or wrong I was, and then, well, we'll see what it's looking like going into Worlds. So we have Arc Duraludon, and Arc Duraludon has been really good this format. Arc Duraludon plus like whatever has been very, very strong because you have a good answer into decks like Lugia that have been popping up. Duraludon is a really hard Pokemon for a lot of decks to deal with besides like Gardevoir. Really, like Gardevoir is like the only deck that can feasibly deal with it right now. Chien-Pao Excalibur will be able to deal with it very, very well, but Chien-Pao only having 220 HP means that Duraludon can one-shot this Pokemon. Arceus can power up your board, and Arceus decks are like just like very powerful in general. I think I still put this in tier 1, just because I think Arc Duraludon as a whole is very, very, very strong. It's just very, very powerful, I think, and it's hard to like do anything to, like, you know, like it is one of those decks where like it doesn't have to do much to win games. I played it for the first time. I mean, I guess I've played it before, but I played it for the first time at my cup this weekend in some capacity, and yeah, it just kind of felt broken. Arc Pika, I think, falls under the same vein. I wouldn't necessarily put it in tier 1, though. I think Arc Pika has a little bit less agency than Arc Duraludon, because Arc Duraludon is kind of... Duraludon has this one card answer to everything, and Pika doesn't really do that. But with Pika, you don't really have any bad starters, so I would put this in tier 2. It's the same vein as Arceus decks in general. I think Arctina employs the Arc Duraludon method, where you're not a unbreakable wall, however, but you're an unstoppable force, with Giratina being something that's one of the few things in this format that can one-shot big threats. Giratina has 280, which lets you take out things like a Gardevoir with the Cleansing Gloves, a Goodra with a Rope, Lugia that doesn't have a V-Guard. If you have a Choice Belt, you can go through it. With a Choice Belt, you go through a Mew V Max. Like, you basically can one-shot anything in the format with Giratina, hypothetically. So I think because of that, it goes into tier 1. Chien-Pao Excalibur, I think, ends up going into tier 2, just because while this deck is going to probably set up almost every game due to Irida and the natural consistency of the deck, probably being very, very well with Chien-Pao finding your waters, and, you know, Irida getting pretty much everything you need to set up on turn 1 every game, it will be very consistent to get to Excalibur, get to your Chien-Paos, get to the energies. However, my biggest concern with the deck is that you're not efficiently prize trading in a lot of situations. Given that Chien-Pao is a 2-prizer, and as far as I know, I don't think there's any good 1-prize decks that can really rise to the top right now. So I think that's kind of where I'd put that. Just because, like, yeah, it seems interesting, yeah, it seems good, but I don't think it's worth the effort to play this deck. I don't know, I might try it myself. I might play it at a cup, I might play it at a challenge. I do like the Chien-Pao Excalibur engine. It reminds me of Caldeo Blastoise from back in the day, so it is something that piques my interest. I would put Darkrai that don't play this tier, because I think if you're going to play Darkrai, I think Miraidon's just better in terms of an aggressive deck that can ramp up onto the board and do a lot of damage really quickly. With Darkrai, yes, you have Moltres V and the Baby Glare and Moltres to accelerate energies onto the board very quickly, as well as Dark Patch. But these are all like bad cards compared to Miraidon, which can just play 15 energy, play Electricity Generator, have typing on a lot of things, be able to use Beach Court, and it's a basic deck. So like Miraidon just kind of does exactly what Darkrai wants to do on a basic deck. So I would just play that instead if you were going to play something in that regard. I think Dialga Magnezone also goes into the don't play tier. It's funny, it's goofy, but it's like a lot of setup, and I think people have done well with it in challenges and cups, but I would never bring it to a major event. I think this is one of those decks where it just doesn't come with me to a major, it just stays in the binder. It's fun, you know? Flamigo and the Dangerous Wings gang probably go into tier 3. It is a very strong deck, I think, especially with the Pokemon Go Ditto that can copy like the Murkrow and the Flamigos for basically like no energy cost. or like 1 energy cost. But the problem again is Lost Box being as oppressive as it is to this deck. So this deck is just going to basically get bodied down by Lost Box. Yes, it has a decent matchup into probably big prizers, but I don't even know how decent it can be because you have to go through a lot of your deck before you start ramping up to big damage, which is my biggest concern. But yeah, that's where I kind of figured that out. Gardevoir's tier S for me. I think Gardevoir getting cool tools like Charm of Courage, the Artisan Stadium, like things of that nature will just give Gardevoir more consistency, ways to set up. You have Champions Festival plus the Drifloon combo to basically one-shot any Pokemon in the game with the Charm of Courage. You still have Sky Seal Stone if you opt to go that route. So you have like still a ton of options, a ton of ways to set up your board. And Gardevoir feels like one of the hardest decks to stop once they start getting rolling. Like it's you just have to kind of hope their setup always falters, and it does for the most part. They're a stage 2 deck compared to a lot of these stage 1 decks and like basic big beaters. So it is a little bit rough to get the ball rolling on them, but they will get there. I'm going to put Guardian Mewtwo in tier 1 because while it is still Guardy, your end game win con is Mewtwo as opposed to something like Drifloon Big Charm, Charm of Courage, or Zacian Sky Seal Stone. You're kind of just saying like, hey, my Mewtwo is going to carry me in the late game, like Mewtwo plus Iono or Mewtwo plus Roxanne here. I guess Iono is just going to replace Roxanne in like a lot of these lists. Maybe specifically in Guardian too, because you don't want to discard all your pieces all the time. And early game Ionoing to 6 seems pretty good. I guess Energy is the only thing you want to put on the discard all the time. So I guess you have to play Heavy Ball now because Greninja is so pivotal to do that. Yeah. Tier 2, Goodra goes in there, I think. Goodra, while still being very, very powerful, I think suffers at the hands of the current tier 1 decks that I have placed. Like, I think your Gardevoir matchup is not great. I think your Archdrowdon matchup is not great. And I think your Arctina matchup is not great. So the moment you take 3 negative matchups into tier 1 decks, I don't think you can categorize a deck higher than tier 2. Goodra still has a very solid matchup spread across the single prize guys. And maybe it's fine, but maybe I just might be overreacting. But I think Goodra's just like a little bit worse than it needs to be, to a position where I just wouldn't bring it. Arc Goodra, I guess every Arc deck falls in a tier 2 at worst, just because Arc decks have the whole we can power up our board and just play the game because Arceus is so good. The theory of I have Starbirth plus I have attackers and like you have to go through my board, so that's kind of where I'd put that. Kyurem 30 Energy is a tier 3 meme deck that Pokedad made, and it's really funny, and if it sets up, it can actually roll people. However, I just don't think the deck is like real, but I will put it on tier 3 in case you guys want to go have some fun with it. Lost Box Greninja, which I assume is like the turbo version in this instance, I will put into tier 1 because while I think it's very, very powerful, I think it's not as good as Sablezard in my opinion. And next format, I think Iono really, really hurts decks like this, where it's like the Greninja version, specifically where you're comboing out late game for either Kyogre or like some sort of Mirage Gate play to close out your game, because that's usually the win con for both these versions. Or you need to find those early Mirage Gates and early build up your hand, and decks playing heavier copies of Iono means that while you're setting up your Colruses and putting these pieces in your hand, they're going down to the bottom of your deck. And yes, you're seeing like a fresh grip of 6 cards, but you might need to see those 6 specifically. And Lost Box decks have notoriously had a problem with having very little shuffle draw, meaning that you don't have ways to reset the deck if things get brought to the bottom of your deck. So like Roxanne and stuff have always hurt this deck because you just get put in a position where you don't get a chance to reset your deck. Yes, you can find a Chorus, yes, you can find something else, but let's say 2 Mirage Gates get put at the bottom of your deck. All of a sudden you have no way to go get those, and the game gets really, really hard. So I think it's a little bit sus in that regard. I think Lost Box Tina also falls into tier 1. While I think Tina is very powerful and can deal with a lot of things on the board, I think your regular Lost Box matchup is not that good. I don't think your Gardevoir matchup is necessarily that good either. I think you have a good matchup into both the Arceus decks. Chanpa stuff should be fine. Goodra should be fine. Like a lot of these decks should be fine, but I think you don't have a great matchup into regular Lost Box decks like the Turbo one we just discussed. Excuse me, sorry. Sableye Charizard, and I think Lugia is also pretty suspect, so that's kind of why I put it in tier 1. Tina is still very, very powerful though, and I think you have much more of a board presence, especially in the matter with Iono, or if you get your Tina set up and the ball rolling, maybe that's enough to carry the game for you. Sableye Charizard goes into tier 1 for me, or tier S for me, because I think this deck is much, much better off of playing off the board, because early game you can get a Sableye attach off, and you don't need to focus on putting energies in your discard. You don't need to focus on getting to 10 as quickly as possible. The deck naturally does that over time, playing heavier copies of Beach Court, heavier copies of Sableye, heavier copies of Psychic Energy, heavier copies of Clara. Like, you're basically just upping the counts on everything, becoming a more consistent I'm a Sableye deck with some early crams. And that's your identity. And you have a late game finisher and Rad Zard to close out the game. Besides the archetypes, no one's really playing Lost City, so your Zard is a little bit safe in all those matchups. Like, Zard is very good against the Gardevoir matchup. Zard is very good into the Qianpao deck. Guard is good into, or Zard is also really good into the Arceus decks. However, you're at risk of getting Lost City at any certain point. So that is a little bit of a spooky angle. But if you don't get Lost City, you're probably winning the game. It's as simple as that. Lugia colorless, I probably put into tier 1, just because you get Jet Energy now, and you have, like, I think 2 more new energies. Let me look at the set list real quick. I think you get Jet Energy and Therapy Energy. Basically, the Therapy Energy is very cool because you just remove special conditions, so now you can't be paralyzed, which is ridiculous. Like, thanks for that buff. Now Articuno can't really deal with that matchup. You get Luminous Energy as well, I guess. And Luminous Energy, well, that doesn't work in the colors build. Ignore that. You get Jet Energy, which lets you, like, basically not have to attach to your active Archeops to retreat, which, like, saves you an energy card sometimes in those late game situations. Like, you just naturally attach to Lugia, pivot it into the active, or naturally attach to another attacker, pivot into the active, giving you energies that aren't, like, I don't know, you don't need to play, like, 3 Gift Man. Like, you don't need to play, like, 3 V-Guard. And you also don't need to play, like, Regenerative. I think those energies are kind of bad, so you have more options now. So the colorless build gets better, because now you have cards like Regigigas, Snorlax that can be very powerful in these scenarios, especially if these 3-prize decks, like VMAX decks, become more popular. Lugia T-Tar I put in tier S. I think Lugia is still very, 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 very good. I think Lugia Signal Strike is still going to be very, very strong. Jet Energy only helps this deck out because you now have these big, heavy retreat cost guys who actually need all their energy to attack. You get Luminous Energy, which means you can play, like, some sort of splash attacker in here, giving you 1 colored energy to actually do something with it. Like, I would probably play, like, 1 or 2 Luminous just to be able to, like, recycle my fish into the deck more than anything, because the fish is one of the biggest liabilities, like Luminian, so you have that option. Now, Meowscarada says, ability, Magic Bouquet. Meowscarada, you must discard a grass from your hand to choose one of your opponent's bench and put 3 damage counters on it, and that is Nail Scratch, 100 plus 120 if it already has damage. I would put this in tier 3. While it is really cool, and I think the ability is, like, really, really amazing, I just would not play it because the stage 1 and stage 2 are not good enough, or stage 1 and basic. Like, Gardevoir is only as good as it is because Curlia is as good as it is. Meowscarada does not have that. So, while it seems fun, and I think the ability and the attack are really, really good, it's just getting to that point in the game. And then 2 colorless does mean that you can use double turbo, which is completely fine. Yeah, so 200 damage, still pretty hefty swing, 310, no fire types that are relevant. So maybe if there's, like, a turbo Meowscarada build or something that can do something with damage counters, maybe I'd play it. Maybe it seems interesting. I would come back to this card. Mew DTE I would put into tier 1 because I think Mew DTE is still very powerful. I think Mew has always been very good. Judge Path, Iono Path, like, whatever. Like, now you can play Judge and Iono and Roxanne. Like, Mew can employ all of these strategies to kind of win these late game scenarios now. Go back to playing, like, Lost City and stuff to deal with Drapion a little bit. But the deck is still always powerful. Like, Mew is Mew. Like, I think it'll be good until it rotates out. Tier 2 is Fusion Mew. I think Fusion Mew is a little bit clunky. It's got a very high power ceiling, but I think it just fizzles out a lot of the time, especially when you're put in a position where you need to find all those pieces on turn 1, and in the process you're, like, blowing your V-Star, and, like, you're doing so much, and then, like, with Lost Box and stuff being so relevant in the meta, like, a lot of the time maybe you're only getting 1 prize, and it's, like, a really, really, really feels bad moment. Miraidon goes into tier 2 as well. I think Miraidon has proven itself over and over again that it can be a top contender amongst the big boys. The ability is very good. The amount of damage that it can output is very good. And the way it can capture games as quickly as it can is really, really scary to me. So Miraidon, I think, deserves a spot in tier 2 minimum. Probably bottom of tier 2, closer to tier 3 if I had to say, but I think it's still very powerful. Noivern GX, or EX, sorry, has for double colorless, it's stage 1, 70 and all damage prevented to it by basic Pokemon. The next turn has Psychic Dark, 140, and they can't play special under your stadiums. This would be interesting. So I think I could put it in tier 3. I think it's, like, an interesting deck if you could kind of pull it off in the capacity that the card designers want to make it work. I think it's going to take some time for these kinds of cool archetypes to be good until rotation happens. Oinkoloid, I think, also goes into tier 3 because it's not necessarily good, but it's not necessarily bad. It's very just laissez-faire, very simple at what it does, nothing crazy. Palkia probably also goes in that category because you're always a 2-for-2 prize trader in every regard. And I think if you're going to play some sort of water deck, I think just put Palkia into Qianpao, and you have a better water type attacker that can capitalize on the board early, and then you can go to your Qianpao to clean up big attacks later in the game. Penny Lost Box tier 2, just because I think tier 1. I'll say Penny Lost Box or Penny Control is probably tier 1, just because the only deck it really loses to is Duraludon and then Gardevoir. But I also think like people are not going to be good enough to play this deck properly besides Sander. Control is very difficult to play as an archetype. And then on top of that, I think Iono is going to hurt this deck quite significantly. No, it doesn't actually. Iono is going to help this deck quite significantly and give it a lot of new tricks. Quakewivel has Live Samba 60 and then switch with your bench. Propeller Shot 240. I just wouldn't play this card. Like, this one just seems pretty bad. Like, I don't know. Like, I could be coping here and be like, hey guys, maybe this card's decent. No, it's just bad. I'll put it in tier 3. I have not tried new Regis with the energy searches and getting through your deck and getting to where you need to be. I guess you get Luminous energies now, so you can play like 2 copies of Luminous, which gives you access to potentially some of your attacks that are a little bit niche. I don't know if that's even worth doing because Luminous only applies when there's only 1 attached, and you want Luminous, and I guess you want Gift in your deck for sure, and then you do all the colored energies. So it probably doesn't even do enough. I probably wouldn't play Regis ever again, unfortunately. But I think in the grand scheme of things, it could be fun. It could be funny. I could bring it to a challenge maybe. I don't know why Shadowrider gets any better. Don't know what new cards you get that like make it so crazy good. I guess if you're behind, you get that triple XL energy, the reversal energy or whatever it's called. And that could give you like 1 big knockout and like swing the game back in your favor. But you're a 3 prize deck that's weak to Drapion. Like, it's kind of hard to play the game when like a Mirage Gate double attached to Drapion like blows up a 3 prizer, like, and you lose like pretty much a majority of the tier 1 decks, and you like have bad matchup into a majority of the tier 2 decks. So, and then we have Skeledirge, which it's just bad, man. Like, I wish this card was better. Also, it's just bad. Both attacks are just terrible, and I think the deck is just not good. Snorlax block, Snorlax stall, I think tier 3. I think rather than trying to stall your opponent, because there's a lot of rope in this format, a lot of penny, and I assume Thornton will also be played pretty heavily in the next format as well. Like, all of those cards are played in heavy capacities, and I think I could see switches in like a lot of these tier 1 decks. Like, Gardevoir is like the only one you could probably trap. Lugia gets jet energy, meaning you can't trap anything either. Like, they can just pivot their bench into the active. So you can't really block stall anybody. Ting-Lu, I think, probably goes into tier 2. I don't actually know how good Ting-Lu is going to be. But I think the idea of Ting-Lu and being able to stop like Lost Box from basically playing their game is really alluring to me. Like, the fact that you can stop Lost Box from basically being like, hey, you don't get to play the game. And the fact that you can also be like, hey, I have damaged your board, your Curlias don't get to work, your Archeopses don't get to work. You now need to play some form of healing to heal those Archeopses to be able to use it. And Ting-Lu's attack, just Land Scoop, does that damage. And like, you could also just play like 4 Hawlucha in the deck to make sure you can ensure you pop off and get that play. I guess Lugia does play Radiant Serena, but besides that, like, every other deck doesn't really have a great way to deal with Ting-Lu and the ability stopping. So, yeah. So Tina gets better. Sableye gets better. Mew gets better. I will put this in tier 2. I will put this in the bottom of tier 2. I know I have a special spot for it in my heart because I played it at the regionals twice. But I think Lost Box decks and Gardevoir decks being better means this deck gets better as well. Mew also is a fine matchup for you. So you have all these decent matchups. However, Tina is not. Duraludon is not. I'm not quite sure the Penny Box deck is good for you either. Like, there are decks in here that are really, really scary. Like, Qianpao probably is very, very scary because they just one-shot you and you don't do anything to back Excaliburs. You just can't get to a position where you can one-shot a Excalibur without popping a Manaphy and having a big play in the same turn. Ting-Lu is really annoying because they just put damage on you and you don't have abilities. Miraidon is bad for you. Like, I don't know. Maybe it is a tier 3 deck. Man. That sucks. I wanted him to be better. Then we have Wo Chien, which does a ton of damage for each prize your opponent's taken. I wouldn't play these two combos as a card. I just think like these two as a combination package probably is not worth playing. But I think in general, Wo-Chien could be really good as like a tech in Lost Box or something where you can Mirage Gate attached to it and then come in and close out a game. But again, Wo-Chien then becomes a 2-prizer in your deck, so maybe you don't want it. But it's very interesting. And then finally we have Zoroark, Hisuian. Very interesting deck. I'm not a huge fan of Hisuian Zoroark, but I think in the grand scheme I understand why it's good and the power level it has. You have to draw a lot of the right cards in the right order, which is why I don't like this deck, and which is why I probably will never put it above tier 3, just because even if you draw all the right cards in the right order, you start to play the game. It's not like you just win the game because you do that. You start to play the game, which is why I think it's a tier 3 deck at best. But that is my tier list for the Paldea Evolved set. Let me know in the comments what you agree with, what you don't agree with. I probably just said a bunch of stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about. I actually do not play the Pokemon trading card game, so everything I'm saying is completely out of my ass. So thank you for watching. I appreciate all the love, guys. Like, subscribe if you're in the content. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. I don't know what that was. And peace out.